let's talk about The Simpsons, the first episode of season 36, the 769th nice episode overall, which premiered this past Sunday, called Bart's Birthday. But I think most of you know it as the Simpsons series finale, which is always going to be confusing because people will be like, oh, where's the series finale one? And it's called Bart's Birthday, which is also why Friends is named the way it is, which The Simpsons doesn't seem to respect as much. Anyway, so the premise of this episode is it starts off and it is acting like it is going to be the Simpsons series finale. Conan O'Brien comes out and says they're going to use Hackbot GBT, voiced by Mark Proisic, he was in What We Do in the Shadows as Colin Robinson. They put in every episode of The Simpsons into it, as well as every series finale that there had ever been to make the Simpsons series finale. And the idea is that it is Bart's birthday. He is actually turning 11, which Bart has always been 10. And various characters are sort of having their sort of finale, basically. You see everyone going oh, and I guess this is the last day. I guess I don't need this. And then they turn off the light and close the door, which I know happened in it's happened in a bunch of series finales, which is kind of a fun joke. And the idea throughout it is that only Bart is sort of rejecting this idea as part of his birthday, as Homer did not deliver mail out the invitations. He needs to give the invitations to people, but as he is, everyone's sort of resolving all their conflicts like it is the series finale and moving on or closing their businesses, like Mo closes the bar, comic book guy's wife gives birth and he decides he doesn't need the comic book store anymore, and Bart's sort of rejecting this kind of AI world. Now, I do think this is a horror movie I thought of myself. I'm sure other people have. It's not a terribly unique idea of someone sort of being in an AI generated world and sort of starting to reject it. I always thought remember when everybody had 10 fingers? I thought that could be, or too many teeth or something like that. That could be cool. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm sure someone will actually make a horror movie about that because it's sort of a good idea for a premise. I think this works in a couple ways. I know a lot of people like the current Simpsons. I only watch them, I watched the Primal one and I did review that, and I've talked about a few of them. But it seems like the only way people really watch Simpsons now is if they have sort of stunt episodes. So I do think that's kind of part of why they did this, because people would actually talk about it, which is totally understandable. The only thing I'd heard about this going in was that Danny DeVito was gonna show up in this. That's the only thing that actually I think leaked from this. But I think it sort of it's an interesting episode. I think it's a cool idea actually of how would you do a Simpsons series finale, and the sort of making fun of series finales is actually kind of a cool premise. And I think overall, unlike the Primal episode or other ones I've seen, I thought this is the most solid concept, script-wise execution I've seen from a modern Simpsons in a while. Now, I don't watch every episode, so take that as it is, but I do think, I know they did a previous one that people said was the series finale, and now they're doing another series finale, which shows you maybe there's too many Simpsons episodes. I don't know. It almost feels like The Simpsons in this, because the whole idea of the show is Bart's rejecting this ending. It feels like the show's rejecting this ending. It almost feels like the show's rejecting the idea that it could ever sort of age or change in a way. It can never be South Park or any of these other shows that try to age the characters or change the characters or end the characters. That can never happen almost. The show itself is going to reject any ending that ever happens. And I find that interesting that they conceptually took that on to an actual episode. What if we did have the show reject a series finale and it just kept going forever? And it is sort of how it feels with The Simpsons. The Simpsons can never end. The Simpsons, just like America will never end, or Rome, or other, Pogs or whatever. These things can never end. They will go on forever. And it's interesting to have someone, particularly Bart, who is at one time was a millennial. I don't know what generation he is at this point, but the idea that he would be rejecting the idea of it ever sort of ending or changing or moving on or evolving, And I do think on an interesting conceptual level, it works in that way because it is like the show is rejecting that it could ever end. And it's like it's better in the show's mind that it can just go on forever until it eventually runs out of steam. And even though we have had the end point, like in theory twice now, we're just going to keep acknowledging that, like, yes, it could end, but will we let it end? And if Bart is in himself is the, most merchandised character when I was a kid, is the one who I relate to as a kid. I guess now I relate more to Homer or whomever, but it very much plays like this show won't let itself die, and this show will never let that happen. And even though it's like on Fox and it makes no sense, Fox financially keeps going and it's on their like terrible. The only way you can watch it is on their terrible website, which makes no sense to me. It will always keep going. It will reject any ending. It will fight any ending, and any attempt at ending it is like fakery, basically. It's a super weird idea. I do think it really works. I did think it was actually kind of a smart episode considering where the Simpsons are, like playing with its own iconography, playing with the idea of having all these things, but also sort of making fun of the fact that they would play with their own iconography. It's probably a smarter episode than I've seen them do in a very long time, and probably one of the better and recent Simpsons that I've seen, at least. It sort of made me actually curious about The Simpsons again, which none of the episodes I've seen, it's kind of like I'm usually one and done, and this actually made me go, maybe I'd check it out. Maybe I should be watching The Simpsons a little more. Maybe there's something interesting here. Do I think there probably is? Probably not, but it is interesting to see a show reject the actual idea of ever resolving these characters and moving on, because The Simpsons can never end and move on. And it even acts like all these complaints, all these things have always, like, they joke about how in the first episode everyone agreed it wasn't as good as it used to be, but I was like, even that is like older, that's been going on for so long. It just feels like this never-ending loop that can never evolve past when it does, or even when the voice actors die, which has happened in other countries and the show is still going. Will The Simpsons sort of ever end? It almost feels like they won't let it, but one day it will, and one day they'll have to sort of deal with that. And when eventually they do, that will be an interesting day. It does feel like they're repeating themselves and messing with it and messing with the iconography and saying something about how IP and The Simpsons can never truly end, while making fun of the fact that all of them did. Is an interesting meta way to do it. Supposedly Futurama did the same thing, but I didn't see the same night, but I didn't see as much talk about that, because I think The Simpsons kind of did a really interesting episode, and maybe the end it's just this forever loop that it can never end and will always be The Simpsons and always be that reliable show that will always be there on Sunday night, and Bart will always be 10 years old, and everyone's just stuck in the stasis that is Springfield.